Hello, friends. This is Dr. Forehand. Just wanted to present this testing ethics and MAP implementation training for you so that you can digest the material before implementing the MAP assessment, which begins today, which is the 24th of August, 2020, and runs until September the 11th, 2020. We'll take just a moment to review the Code of Ethics for educators in regards to testing, and then we'll move on to the administration of the MAP assessment. As you know, we as educators are role models for our scholars, and it's important that we look at our ethical decisions as a responsibility. As a human being, we create personal depth when we make a decision about what is right and what is wrong, and become convicted to those beliefs. It builds our self-esteem. It helps to establish us as role models for our children, our peers, and others that we touch. The Georgia Professional Standards Commission has developed Standard 11 regarding testing. The standard looks at unethical conduct included but not limited to 1. Committing any act that breaches test security, and 2. Compromising the integrity of the assessment. Let's look at some ways that breach test security and confidentiality for our state and system assessments. Possessing unauthorized copies of state and system tests, revealing in any manner any part of secure copyrighted tests to students or others, discussing or reviewing test items or answers, using secure test items and prompts for instructional purposes, failing to inventory test materials upon receipt, failing to provide or attend required training, failing to provide state appropriate accommodations or providing accommodations for those who are not in an approved plan. The following are also acts that compromise the integrity of state and system assessments. Reading parts of the test to a student except where indicated in written plans or directions. Failing to provide an appropriate testing environment by not monitoring the students. Failing to provide or ensure that proper tools are used during testing. Failing to follow the established testing schedule and order of test administration. Failing to ensure students are given the correct form and/or grade level. And failing to follow the directions specified in the manual. It is extremely important that you do not coach, interpret, explain, or paraphrase test items during the test. We cannot provide answers to test questions, erase or alter student answers, and we must not fail to ensure accurate completion of student information, such as the use of a pre-ID label or items that we write in. Discouraging students from putting forth optimal effort, encouraging student absenteeism in order to avoid testing, and reclassifying students for the purpose of avoiding state testing. Think about this quote from an American author. Don't worry that children never listen to you. Worry that they are always watching you. Now let's look at some mistakes that have been made with regards to Standard 11 testing. In this example, the educator whispered to the proctor during the CRCT and made facial gestures at some of the students, which they interpreted as meaning they had the wrong answers. A total of 15 students were coded as irregularities and 5 tests were invalidated. So what happened? The educators received suspended certificates for 2 years. In this example, a test examiner administered part of the state assessment to one student before the other student started. She then texted her colleague to let her know what the students needed to focus on in the classroom for future references. Her certification was suspended for 2 years, and the decision was upheld after she appealed the initial ruling. In a final example, the educator used her school system computer to access dating and singles websites, soliciting relationships with men during instructional time and CRCT test administration. The educator's certificate was suspended for 1 year. In this example, the educator was in and out of the classroom, leaving student CRCT test booklets unsecured in the classroom. Students were present in the classroom at the time, and CRCT material was compromised during the time frame in question. The educator was suspended for 30 days. Let's now venture into the world of administering the MAP assessment in a virtual environment. For the first time ever, we will be implementing the MAP assessment while students are at home. And it's very important that we work together to make this as painless as possible. Our colleague, Ms. Bailey, and I have put this presentation together to support you in hopefully a seamless and flawless implementation of the MAP assessment this fall. We will learn from any mistakes that we encounter, and we will make it even stronger for our second implementation of the MAP assessment this winter and then again this spring. A quick agenda for this meeting will begin with the MAP assessment calendar, followed by the purpose of the MAP assessment. We will then discuss accessibility, accommodations, and equity, remote testing factors, security and test integrity, technology support, and then going forward. Let's first take a look at the assessment calendar. As you see, the first date of fall testing begins today, the 24th of August, and concludes September the 11th, 2020. We hope to have our first assessment complete by this date. Our second implementation of the MAP assessment will be in December, the 2nd through 15th. And finally, our final MAP assessment of the year will be held April 26th through May 7th. And we will evaluate each time if more time should be given for the administration. For those of you who may not be as familiar with the MAP growth assessment, MAP growth is a computer adaptive test, meaning it changes based on the way students respond to the questions. The students will take this assessment 3 times per school year, and the results will provide us with information that will help us to deliver differentiated, appropriate content for each student, and to help determine each student's academic growth over time. The assessment data that we attain in a remote testing environment will be used for the purpose of informing immediate instructional needs of students, such as the development of small groups and individualized intervention. It is very important that we take appropriate measures to be sure that the results that we receive from this assessment are carefully examined to ensure that the results are valid and reliable estimates of student achievement. We must consider how students are performing in the environment in which they are testing. As we've discussed in MTSS meetings, we must triangulate our data to ensure that our students are performing accordingly on multiple assessments before placing students in the tiered intervention supports. This assessment provides anywhere between 42 to 53 questions and takes approximately 60 minutes to complete. The assessment includes multiple choice, drag and drop, and other types of questions. It measures what students know regardless of their grade level. It also measures growth over time and allows us to track student progress throughout the school year and across multiple years. Unlike previous years, this year we will be ensuring that our students receive accommodations for their testing environment. I personally will be entering those accommodations for each student within the testing sessions that you create, and I will be reviewing those accommodations with each teacher to ensure they are followed with integrity and fidelity. You may be a little uneasy implementing the MAP assessment to students virtually. Let's take a look at the favorable factors. The actual test-taking experience is almost exactly the same between remote and in-school MAP growth testing. Remote testing actually enables us to gather valuable data during closures that will help us to understand what our students are ready to learn. Also, the data that we get from our MAP growth test can be used in the same way that data from our in-school test are used, and our data can also be accessed in all of the same reports. MAP cautions us to really think about the data that we receive, because the MAP requires a real-time communication method that will enable proctors and students to communicate during the test. We will be using Blocksy, to be discussed shortly. Incremental effort should be provided to scrutinize test results to ensure that those results are valid and reliable of student achievement. This involves reviews of data elements including the proportion of items answered correctly, the proportion of items that were rapidly guessed, and the overall test duration, as well as the standard error of measurement. Digital literacy and digital equity of our schools' families may provide a challenge. Next, Mrs. Bailey, one of our amazing 5th grade teachers, will help you to learn how to create a testing session. We will need each of you to create a testing schedule so that you know which students are testing on which days and make the parents aware of the scheduled date and time. Testing in small groups is best because you can have a visual on all students testing at all times using Blocksy, which will be modeled by Mrs. Bailey. Teachers, especially those with younger students, can complete several log-on practice sessions so that everyone is comfortable with logging in. After Ms. Bailey shows us how to create a testing session, I'll show you how to access the login practice sessions. Thanks. Here's Ms. Bailey.
Hello, ATK family. I'm going to show you how to set up your MAP testing before students start their MAP test. You're going to want to go to teach.mapnwea.org. That is teach.mapnwea.org. From the dashboard, you are going to go to Manage Test Sessions. Here, you will choose Test My Class. Your classes are imported from Infinite Campus. You will all test your homeroom class. So select homeroom and then say Test Now. Now, we are not going to actually test at this point. This is where you want to set up your class. You will notice all of your students in your homeroom class are here. If you have somebody who was added to Infinite Campus within the last couple of days, they might not be on this roster. If they are not, then you can go to Add Student. You will need their IC number so that you can add the student to your class. We are going to assign the test for our students so they do not have to select it on their own. To do this, you're going to say Select Status and All. All of your students have now been selected. You can go to Assign Test, and in the drop-down menu, it shows all the tests that are offered on MAP. This is why you want to do this ahead of time, because you do not want the students choosing the wrong test. We are going to be in the growth area. You are going to choose the appropriate test based on your grade level. So you're either going to choose Growth Math 2 through 5, Growth Math K2, Growth Reading 2 through 5, or Growth Reading K2. I have assigned all of my students Growth Math 2 through 5, and I can see that they have all gotten that test. I want to save this so that I am ready to go when it's the day of testing. In order to do that, we're going to click End Session. And this is where we can rename our session name. I do not like having any words because I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for the students. So I just remove the word in front of it. So now my test session name is 3780. There is no reason to write down the password because every time you log in, that will change. But your session name will stay the same if you say save and exit. My test session is now saved down here in my saved testing sessions 3780. That is how we set up our class for MAP. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Now let's look at how students can practice logging in before the test begins. Students will visit practice.mapnwea.org. They will enter the username GROW and the password GROW. This site will let the student know if they have a pop-up blocker that is added to their screen and gives them steps to remove it. Test.mapnwa.org is where students will log in to begin their testing session. Considering the virtual environment, we must consider testing schedules that are convenient for both you and your students. Remember, only one test attempt will be considered as a student's official growth event for the testing term. Think about what times of day are parents and caregivers most likely to be home if there is technical assistance needed. When are students most likely to show up to a test? What times during the day are distractions most present in the home? Because the overall goal is to have a score for all students in the classroom, teachers should make every attempt to have their students participate in the assessment sessions. This includes keeping a log of any attempt to reach parents concerning MAP testing. As Mrs. Bailey will model shortly, you should be able to view all of your students' testing in your session on one computer screen using Blocksy. You should be able to verify that the student is actively at the computer and engaging with the test. You should actively monitor the test-taking environment and address any issues that may prevent your students from successfully completing the test. And make sure that students have their login information prior to the start of the test. For integrity and security purposes, we must ensure that students are not using other devices such as a calculator or other websites during testing. Only you, I, proctors, and the students are logging into the system. I will be monitoring to ensure that proctors are actively monitoring students during testing, as I also have access to Blocksy, so I'll be there to support you. And I need to make sure that you have the approved assessment materials. Scratch paper is allowed during the administration of the math assessment. I must ensure that only teachers and students are logging into the system, and that students know they're allowed to use scratch paper for the math assessment. Also, we must prohibit the use of unapproved electronic devices during the test, except for the use of a calculator if it is embedded within the assessment, or it should be provided as a student accommodation. I must ensure that we prohibit the use of outside internet sources and unauthorized assistance to students. For example, some students with a 504 or IEP may have a read aloud accommodation provided by a certificated educator. Furthermore, we must prohibit the screen capture of test items the best way possible. You may be thinking, what happens if I or my students need tech support? Unfortunately, NWEA is unable to support parent questions or inquiries concerning tech support. You, as teachers, are the first tier of support for parents and students during this process through the use of Blocksy or Google Meet. Ms. Lynch, Mrs. Bailey, myself are the second tier of support for parents and students during this process. Our school technology specialist is the third tier of support for parents and students during this process. You may experience some of these common login issues. Choosing the wrong name during the login process can be avoided by using Blocksy to ensure the correct student is prepared to take the assessment. A student's name may be missing from the test session, so we need to ensure all of our students' names are in the session, even new students that may be entering throughout the window. Students may close or lose the map growth testing window. There could be white screens or spinning wheels. A student might be kicked off because of internet connection. Or they may be rapid guessing and they were able to receive a slow down sloth screen. Students may lag behind severely or even receive a message that says, "Oops, where's my testing window?" We have all experienced these kind of challenges when working with technology. We will all just take a deep breath and do our best to help students regain access to their assessment during the testing window. If you have any challenges, reach out to myself, Mrs. Lynch, or Mrs. Bailey. We look forward to supporting you. Now, here's Miss Bailey. Miss Bailey, how do teachers get started on the day of the assessment? Can you show us?
Okay, ATK, this is what you're going to do the day of testing. You're going to log into teach.mapnwea.org. On the dashboard, you are going to go to Manage Test Sessions. In the last session, we saved a testing session. That will show up here when we click Show. This is my saved testing session, and I want to say Test Now. All of my students are here, along with the test that I had assigned in the last video. Now, when you're testing, you're also going to want your Blocksy opened. This way you can see the student's screen. They can ask you questions, and you can give them the session name and password. Of course, having Google Meet open will also be helpful during this time. However, due to the technology issues some of our students are having, they might not be able to be on Meet and do the test without their computer closing down or lagging real bad. So just keep that in mind. So in Blocksy, we're going to start our class that has our homeroom students. I have a student already logged into the computer in order to take this test. So I'm going to message this student the session name, (3780), and the password 3627. On a student's computer, their Blocksy messages come up as notifications right here. If the student says they do not see the notifications, they need to make sure these notifications are turned on. They can check this by going into the time, going to notifications and clicking the down arrow and making sure there's a check mark beside Blocksy. So they would type in their session name, 3780, and the password 3627, and click the blue arrow. On the next page, they are going to find their name. So they can click the down arrow, or they can start typing here their name. Notice that the test box is already filled in for them once they select their name. This is because we set up our class earlier. Now they're going to click the blue arrow. Here, they need to double check and make sure they have the right name. If they do, they will say yes. If they don't, they will say no to go back to the list of students. Now they need you. They need you to confirm. Now, in Blocksy, you're going to want to expand their screen and make sure the student on the computer and the student who's waiting to be confirmed is a match. If you don't catch this right now, don't worry, there is a solution. In the NWEA dashboard, we can see that this student is waiting to be confirmed. I can just click on this blue button and confirm her at this time. Now she will see a blue arrow to click to get started on her test. If you realize that the student, after you confirm them, the student does not match who is logged into the computer, we can take care of that. We are going to select this student, and then we are going to select terminate. We're going to terminate the test because it is the wrong student taking the test under this name. Once this student's test has been terminated, their screen will change to this, and it says that they can go back to the login. Now, of course, I'm going to use the same student, so therefore, I will go to that student and say test again. And once it goes test again, notice it goes back to a waiting student. You have to have it as a waiting student or that student's name will not show up in the list for them to choose from. You can also do this if you suspect them of cheating, especially if you have Google Meet open and you see somebody at their computer helping them. Now, another reason you want to keep Blocksy open during testing is because there are some problems that come up during testing. Sometimes the student's computer screen will turn white and it will not show a question. It will not show anything for the student to actually click on. So in Blocksy, we can enlarge the screen again. Also, students might have a question about how to answer the question. So this one is dragging the numbers, and they might think that they need to go up and click in the boxes to type. And that is not what they need to do. They need to actually drag. So if you see a student on the same question, you might want to send them a message saying drag the numbers to the box to help them out. Now, if a student's computer kind of freezes, it goes white, they cannot move on. Sometimes, I mean, it's just a plain white screen. There's no question, there's no arrows. Then in your map, you will go to that student, select and pause. Their screen will then change. And if we click refresh page on the map, it makes it go a little bit faster. So now it says their test is paused. So then you can go to select status or to the specific student, say paused, and then resume. And usually that fixes the problem. And once you resume, they get the blue arrow again so that they can start their test back. Now, if a student has to leave the computer without finishing their test, that is perfectly fine. You can select that student, select action, and we are going to suspend. Suspending the test allows them to start back over within 28 days where they left off. So instead of starting the test all the way back over as if we terminated, it actually keeps their progress from up to this point, so they do not have to start back over at question 1. Be mindful that you cannot suspend or terminate a student if the status says awaiting student, if it says to be confirmed, or if it says completed. So if a student, make sure you pay attention in Blocksy, because if a student is on the wrong name and you do not catch it until the end of the test, you cannot terminate that test score, and that will go with that student. that they took the test under. This is how you are going to administer the test using Blocksy. If you have any questions, please come see me in my room.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. We appreciate you helping us to get our testing session set up and showing us what the testing session will look like once we are logged in. Let's now take a look at 2 more resources that may help you during testing. Hello, friends. I just wanted to take a moment to review this Proctor checklist. You could use it or not, depending on how familiar you are with the math assessment. But you'll see at the top is the login, teach.mapnwa.org. This is where you will begin map growth testing. Your first item is to create your test sessions, add in your students, assign each student a test. I will be assigning the accommodations for you. You don't need to worry about that, and I will review those accommodations with you. And then name your test session something easy, as Mrs. Bailey shared. If you need even more direction on how to create test sessions or logging in, you can click here. It'll take you to another simple video to watch. Then you want to schedule your test and practice sessions. Determine the time, the date, the length of each session. There is a worksheet at the bottom for you to use if you'd like to use this to set up your session names. Perhaps you want to test your students in small groups. Perhaps you want to test everyone in the same subject at the same time. This is here for you to use however you see fit based on the needs of your classroom. There is a device readiness practice exercise and video so your students and their families can practice seeing if their device is ready. I've also implemented a Proctor slide deck attached to the email where you can, and I'm going to review that with you in the next little clip. There are communication letters you can send to families. You can edit them yourself for remote testing. This should be used for K2, depending on which type of device you have, and then 2+ if you have the Chromebooks. There's a practice session we mentioned earlier in the presentation. They can click here. It'll take them to the practice test website where they will simply put that login and password I gave you here, and they can do a practice test. Then you want to share instructions for how to join each test session, remind the parent or the caregiver they may need help to help the student get logged in, and so they know the days and dates and times for testing and the need for scratch paper and pencil, especially for the math test. So again, this is a resource just for you to use if it helps you to be organized. And now let's take a look at the Proctor slide deck. Okay, friends, this is a Proctor slide deck that you can use to help guide your testing sessions. And you feel free to edit this, as appropriate. It just says test day slides. You introduce the test. It tells the students they're taking the MAP growth assessment, and it lets them know, helps them know to let you know what they're ready to learn next. And it's okay that they don't know all the answers, just to give their best effort and take their time. Here's where you can give them directions on taking breaks, directions for if they need a break, what they are to do. Can they use a calculator? And it just explains that on some questions, a calculator will appear. If it doesn't appear, that means they're not allowed to use the calculator function. It encourages them that if they don't know the answer, and it's expected that they don't, then they should just try their best. As well here, if they need to change their answer to a previous question, it says no. After they click that arrow button, their answer is final. And the test is always changing and it's updating based on how they answer each question. So each new question depends on how they answered the one before it, and that's why you can't go back. This lets them know what they'll see on their screen once they have completed the test, anything else they're going to need during the test. This is where you will remind them to keep Blocksy open during the test, so there's clear communication if they get stuck or need support. And then these last slides, obviously, let them know that if they need help, how to reach out. Do they need their parent or caregiver during the test? This is just to let them know you may need them to help get logged in, but after that, they should, leave your workspace so that they can get we can get a true reading of what the students know. Now, these next slides are how to help the student get logged in if they get stuck. I'll just kind of scroll through these. Hopefully they practiced before the test. Then it gives the teacher or proctor some guidance in case kids get stuck. So here are some common issues during login. They get an oops, where's my test window? They may be asked to do a workstation readiness check, or the session login information is not working. So here are how you would proceed in those three cases. This is a slide just to wish the students good luck and let them know when the testing session will be over. Then we have some more troubleshooting tips. If oops, where is my testing window pops up, workstation readiness check error, a student can't find their name when signing in, a glossary for the select action dropdown in case you need to pause for them to go to a break, confirming when they start the test, terminating a test should any of these things be needed, they're under the select action drop-down box, and this will remind you how to get there. Pausing a test, if a student's test is taking a while to load, this lets you know what you could do on your Proctor console, and then what happens when you end the test session. So hopefully this Proctor slide deck will help you feel more comfortable as you're giving the assessment, and happy testing.